I'm Bechara Karam, and I'm a Lebanese American citizen, and I'm 17 years old. I grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts, and my family moved down here when I was about 8. But we go to Lebanon about every 2 years, so we keep in contact with our cultural roots. I feel like they've played a really important part in developing who I am, obviously, but there have been some upsides and downsides regarding to the cultural norms and values, and those conflict with my American ones at times too. So it's been a balancing act trying to keep the heritage, but also using that as well as my American heritage to cultivate who I am as a person. In Lebanon and the general Arab world, there is a lot of emphasis on masculinity, and while that is pretty prominent in American culture as well, I feel like it's definitely magnified a lot in the Middle East. It's up to the point where the way that you sit, the way you speak, is overanalyzed by the people around you, and the degree to which you are masculine defines who you are as a person. And I don't feel that pressure here necessarily. While there is definitely pressure to act more masculine, it's not to the extent that it is overseas. So over here, there's definitely a lot more. There's a lot more liberty in what you can say, what you can do, how you can act without being criticized, than abroad. What is considered masculine is definitely defined by the place where you grow up. I feel in America, growing your hair out wouldn't be seen as something outwardly feminine, whereas in the Middle East, men are definitely pressured to keep more of a groomed, shortened haircut than in America. One of the most rebellious things I did in my teenage years is deciding to grow out my hair even up to this length. My mom is constantly trying to threaten to cut it off while I'm sleeping because it's not something that's typical of a man to do in Lebanon or in the Middle East especially. I had a very big disagreement with my mom in the middle of Dayland because I wanted these shoes that were red and they had gold on the rims, and she basically pushed me out of Macy's because because she said that they were made specifically for gay people. So there's definitely some backlash with that. It's more, in the Middle East, they try to make you conform more to traditional standards, while here I feel that embracing who you are and your individuality is definitely something that's welcomed and appreciated. Growing up, I definitely tried to stick with the traditional roots because I grew up with my parents like 24/7. When you're a child, you listen to everything your parents say. But as I grew up and I formed my own identity, I learned that it's important to be yourself regardless of where you are, regardless of what factors are influencing you. So I bear in mind the fact that my parents might not agree with everything I do or everything I say or how I act, but I don't let that redefine my identity. There is definitely an Arab community in Miami that I think is underrepresented at times. They mainly exist in the churches. Church provides a community where Arabs can interact and they talk. And after church, after the service, there's this thing called a coffee hour where everybody stays back and they talk. And it's really cool because everyone has the same sentiments. Everybody misses their home country. Everybody wishes that they can go back. But we all have, most of the people in the church come from backgrounds which have been troubled by the outbreak of war or international conflict, which is the reason why they're here. And I think that the fact that they can connect is very cathartic, it's very therapeutic for them. They enjoy each other's company because having similarities with other people obviously makes living in a foreign place a lot easier. My mom and my dad both lived through the Lebanese Civil War. They both wanted to gain higher education. No one in my family is college educated. That was something that was really important to them. My dad had applied to college and he was about to go into college before the war happened. My mom was around high school when the war happened, and they spent most of their time learning how to distinguish between types of bombs and missiles and rockets, which is pretty atypical for a child's education. Which is why they, along with a lot of other Arab families, who have lived through political strife like that definitely put a lot of educational emphasis on their children because they want them to fulfill the dream that they never got to realize. I've struggled a lot to identify where home is for me just because I've lived in Massachusetts for 8 years and Miami for 9. But I always go back to Lebanon. That's been a constant. I've probably lived in Lebanon for a total of like a year and a half of my life, but it still feels like home more than any other place because that's where family is, and that's where my heart stays no matter where I go. That's always where I'm gonna go back to, and that's where I get most of that's where I have the most people who support me and who love me and are always there for me. So no matter where I go, I think no matter where I live for whatever period of time, I think I'm always gonna call Lebanon home.